Hello and welcome to Wednesday. It is a glorious sunny day here in Hertfordshire, and we are back with day two of our Japan special. I have taken over the reins today, so I am your host, and I have the lovely Joe Allen here today. Joe, how are you?
Hello, hello. Good morning, everyone. I'm not sure if it's not that sunny out for us in London. Obviously yesterday foggy, this morning frosty, tomorrow frogs. I don't know what comes after that. But yeah, I'm doing good, thanks, Tigz. Hope you're doing well as well.
Yes, we are joined in the chat by lots of lovely faces. We have Andreas, we have Sean, Olivia, Oliver, sorry. We've got Nagua, Tony. There's loads of you. I can see Eric in there as well. Sandrine, so many faces. Welcome back. I am monitoring the chat in Behance. So if you want to join in the conversation, please head over there. And if you have any questions throughout the day, please pop them in and we can ask Joe as he goes along. So Joe, what are you going to be covering today?
Well, following on from yesterday with yourself going through some Japan photos and stories of Japan, I'm continuing on the Japan train, and that is a little segue into what we're discussing because it's no secret that I love trains in Japan. I mean, I love all forms of transport, but trains in particular. There's just something special. There's something magical about them. I think I have spent some time trying to work out what it is that draws me to trains, and I think it's the fact that they run on such a a network of things. You can't deviate from the network, so there's rules, there's guidelines, there's structure
Mm-hmm.
in place. I like that. There's the fact that they are for the most part smooth and consistent. So from a filming perspective, whether you're on the train or off the train, filming it is always smooth. So, for example, if you're on the train, you can ride the train and you'll get parallax shots through cities and all sorts, which just adds an extra dimension. If you are off the train, then you get these sort of breaks through a static scene. You've got tall buildings and you've just got this train that runs through and it doesn't break from its shape. It's not like you've got a car, then a van, then a bike, then something else. It's just, it's rigid in its form. And so it breaks through like these arteries through a city. And then you get the magic one where you're on a train and you capture another train running at the same speed and you get the parallax or it swaps over and everything combined is just magical from a art perspective that I love. So that's one of the things. You can either love trains as well or maybe not pay attention to them, but I can almost guarantee you that after you've seen some of the footage that I want to share, you might look at it a little bit differently. So I'm going to be running through adding in we're going to call this what was it, journey through Japan, and
Yeah.
like a trains and other things in motion through a whole host of clips that I got from my recent trip to Japan, which was 3 months from just before Halloween until just a couple of weeks ago. And I've got an awful lot of footage, so plenty to work with. And we're going to go from the ground and try and build a bit of a sequence. Maybe like a 30-second sequence or something. Probably for times like this, when someone says, "Why do you like trains so much?" I'm like, here's this 30-second clip that shows why I love trains so much. And in particular, trains in Japan, of course, everyone knows it's one of the most efficient places in the world. And so things run on time, things are clean. It's just a brilliant spot. So if that's not sold the idea of train travel, then I'm not sure what will.
Plus, they have some pretty epic trains in Japan. I know that I came across the Hello Kitty Shinkansen while I was out on my last trip.
Yeah.
And there is a train. I can't. You have to remind me. I think it's in Tokyo. It might be in Kyoto. They actually have a train that has a real life cat as a conductor somewhere in Japan, don't they?
Seen an Instagram of this.
Yeah.
It's like there's a particular cat that wears like a conductor's hat, and
Mhm.
I think it's one of the drivers' cats or something that just comes along for rides every now and then.
So yeah,
But yeah,
we might be finding some great themed trains through some of your content. Tim has put a joke in the comments saying Liz also loves trains. I mean, she's also talking about the Adobe Express. So there's lots of groaning in the comments section right now. So what software are we working in today? For those people that maybe haven't worked with video before, what's your go-to tool?
So I edit everything in Premiere Pro, and hopefully you can see that now. So at the moment, we're just looking at Premiere Pro as a kind of a blank workflow. I have opened up my existing Japan project. So one of the first workflow things that I'll talk through is how I actually structure everything. So in terms of, if I open up a Finder window, oh no, we're in full screen. Okay, let's go over here. So in terms of how I structure everything, I like to keep everything organized in kind of a single project per trip. Now, this doesn't always work out as a good idea, because there are times where during a particular trip, I may work on an individual video that isn't related to the whole of the trip. It's very, independent of its thing, in which case I'll separate that out. But for the most part, I'll have a particular project folder, which I date and number based on other things. The reason these are missing some numbers is because those have been backed up on my server. But this is my active SSD, and then this is a mirrored copy. So I then import all of my footage, and I actually use a program called Hedge to do this, which is a great application because you can put in your memory cards, multiple devices that you're pushing to, and you can set up a transfer, and it will just go to multiple places at once, do all the renaming, and it does it blazing fast. And with that, it will also, bring things across in nice folder structures that you want. So I label things by the camera that was used. The files are then all renamed by reverse date, then the time of when the clip started. And then if it was camera A or camera B, so on this trip we were using two XH2Ss, and then a little description of, the little location and the city, and then the original file name. Now, the reason that I do this whole renaming thing, and I think this is so important, is because if, for example, I shoot over 10,000 clips, your camera is going to reset that counter back to 0. If I'm then on a particular project, and for this Japan trip, I think I actually shot around 15 to 20,000 individual clips, maybe a bit more. So if I had this one project that had everything involved with it, and suddenly my counter resets on a camera, and that could happen by your second shot. You may come from a previous trip on shot number 999, and then you jump in and it resets. So once you start importing all your files, Premiere may lose track of where these files are because it will start referencing the wrong thing. So it's so important to rename by something that just is a moment in time. It's such a unique thing, and that is the reverse date and the original time that it was shot. The reverse date is usually enough, but the original time of the shot is so helpful when you mix A and B cameras. Because it means that all of these shots, if the cameras are set identically on the time, all of these shots, whether it's camera A or camera B, are going to be in chronological order. And so they're all going to merge together on a timeline beautifully. Previously, I actually used to separate my cameras in their folder structures, camera A, camera B. But doing this method, I was like, this saves so much time because I don't really need to care whether it was camera A or B at the time I come to edit. I just need to have them in order.
Especially when they're the same camera brand, like if they're the same make and model. Like I know that in the past, like I've shot video on the Canon 5D Mark II and 3, and they had a different colorway. So it did make sense to split them out sometimes, but especially when you've got the two cameras of the same type, having them all in the same folder must really speed up your workflow.
Yeah, definitely. And in this particular trip, it doesn't really highlight too much about having multiple cameras because I was using just two of the same brand model, except for sometimes an X-T5. These are both Fujifilm cameras. But on another trip, so current project that I'm working on, this one at times has become more complex because there's like a GoPro, a Canon, and a Fujifilm, and those ones I do want to keep separate because they have different color science and methods to them. But yeah, for the most part, everything just comes in here. We have got some duplicate things here, which don't have any labels. Now, the reason I've got those is because I did a little import. I forgot one of the memory cards recently,
Oh
and
no.
I added it in blank without the descriptor. So using my software, I can just import everything. And if I added a descriptor, it would have put it the same description for all of the dates. So I left it
Yeah.
blank, which means these can just go in. So that was date number 13. There we go. And now I can delete this one.
And how long are the clips roughly that you're taking? Do you work in short forms of like 15-second clips, or is it more long form that you're capturing?
Yeah, it's kind of I think of them as short, but if I told that to someone else, they would think they were quite long. So
Yeah.
for me, a short clip is like 20 seconds or so.
Yeah.
And for each clip, I'll try and make sure that I'm fully set up as I'm about to take it. So I don't want any of that, lifting the camera up and, pressing the shutter as you're getting to it. So I'll make sure that I'm fully set. I'm static with my elbows, and I most of the time, about 80% of the time, use the viewfinder as well. So I've got that third point of contact for stable shots. That's one of my top priorities. And then I'll film. I'll let the scene play out in front. My style of film is, if we jump into Premiere, I can maybe show you some clips. So my style of video is quite static. So I love just finding a frame and just having that frame visible. So let's find something recent.
Have you found that, especially with Reels and sort of TikToks and everything like that's come about sort of in the last couple of years, have you found that your video style has changed? Because when you say obviously like your short is about 20 seconds, actually it's kind of the same for me, because I'm always like aiming for that 15 seconds of content for a TikTok or a Reel or something like that. Has that changed the way you work at all?
If I'm honest, not a huge amount. Sorry, I'm just going to drop the volume on Premiere just so it doesn't blast your ears when I play this. Hopefully that works. Yeah, not a huge amount in terms of how I think of it. Maybe my perception in the edit when it comes to publishing content. I'm very acutely aware now that people's attention spans is even less than what it was 5-10 years ago, which of course was even less than what it was 20 years ago. So who knows where we'll be in terms of attention in 10 years time. But one thing that really stands out is so in my space on YouTube, I'm doing photography and just creating travel photography videos. When I started, there wasn't very many, if anyone, doing photography-based vlogs whilst traveling. A lot of people shared their photography from behind a desk and they just spoke about it. No one actually was going out and bringing people along for that journey. And so I started making these videos about 9 years ago or so because I wanted to watch that. And so I was, in this process of making the things that I wanted to watch and find. But as time has gone on, there are plenty more people now who do these types of videos and other things. And so it is a more competitive area to be in. And with the birth of like TikTok and Reels and stuff, people they almost want the answer within 2 seconds. Like they want to make sure that what they've clicked on is absolutely, definitely not going to waste their time. And I never want to make a video that wastes anyone's time anyway. But given that my direction is always wanting to work on something that's, a bit more artful, a bit more creative, to me, that's always something that you need to warm up to. You can't just jump in with the best thing to start with. But through the sort of growth of social media, I've kind of had to accept that, you know what, it's fine to show the answers and then go through and show how you got there. And that almost brings people along for the journey even more because they're excited for where they're going to get to. It doesn't quite make sense psychologically to me because I'm so patient. The amount of videos I watch that even if I'm not interested by, I have to get to the end of it before I can click away. I just, I always think there must be something in here for why this video was made. I'll just give them the time to arrive at the point. And yeah, usually there is something. Whether it was worth the full 10 minutes or so of watching that video, I'm not sure. But anyway, so here's a particular clip. So can I just check? Can you hear that?
Yep.
And yeah, cool. And all right, that's not too loud. Maybe I'll drop it down a little bit more, just because some of these clips, of course, they're going to be at full volume, and I don't really want to do that. So hopefully this adjusts it. Okay, so I kind of just hold my shot, and this clip in particular is 22 seconds. And I'm just holding my frame, and look at that. 3 trains came through. How amazing is that? We can see right through the view as well. Now, holding that shot for multiple, or like an extended duration, allows for things like those happy accidents to happen. Because originally, I knew that the train was coming. I could hear it. I could see it coming up the path. So I was like, I'm going to get my shot of this particular junction. I wished I was a little bit further to the left, but I was actually waiting for the train behind me to get on. So it was more a case of like, I can hear it coming. I'm going to frame here and just go for it. What I didn't realize is that another train was going to come immediately to my right. And then what I definitely didn't realize is that a third train was going to come directly in front of me. And so I could have just filmed this and been like, okay, cool. Person walked in front. All right, let's stop the clip and then just cut. And then I would have missed this and I would have been gutted. So I guess the long story of this is to film for a little bit longer than what you expect, because you're always going to trim bits out, and you want to make sure that the filling of your video is as valuable as it can be. You don't want to leave yourself with just like a second to actually work within your timeline. It's going to really limit and restrict you in your edit. So that, I guess, is like my filming style. And you'll see here that this particular clip, in fact, all of these will look very gray. So this is filmed in log. If you're unaware of that, it's a way of setting your camera to capture more data. So it captures more shadow data, more highlight data, and it sort of compresses it down. So think of it, I'm going to do it for your perspective this way. So think of it as like a funnel of luminosity. You've got highlights, you got your shadows, and as it comes into the sensor, so you got the full spectrum of things. As it comes into the sensor, it actually compresses it down. And so as it compresses down, try and do this as a funnel, it then fits into a color space and a luminosity range that matches our display. So our cameras can capture so much more than our displays can show. That's just the nature of the technology. And in terms of the thousands of different displays that exist, there's no real fast improvement on this. There are things like HDR that will allow for greater luminosity, but that's going to take years until it's everywhere. So we have a limited range.
Is log the equivalent of raw then? If you've got photographers coming in that are trying to get into video, are we saying sort of log is the equivalent of shooting raw?
No, unfortunately not. So in log, what we're doing is the camera is capturing all of this shadow range, all of this highlight range and the mid range, and it's sort of squeezing it. So it's lifting some of that data. And if I show you on a color workspace, so let's say I've got this particular clip that'll work. It's going to load in a second. So what it's doing is it's capturing all of this data, and then it compresses it down and shows it in this flatter form that then fits within the realm of the shadow and highlight data. We then need to stretch that back. And so the way to think of this is video is still very much kind of like a JPEG. So it's like capturing a JPEG that's got lower saturation, lower contrast, but there's data in the file that will allow you to bring it back. If you were shooting raw, you'd have full control over all of those channels for, the RGB channels and everything, but you would be able to change things out, like your white balance, the actual capture of it. Those files are like hideously large in comparison.
Yeah.
So here's an example of the Lumetri scope. So this is going to get very nerdy. So we're going to move past this. We'll go into how we're assembling timelines and things in a moment. But just for the sake of viewing log, so this chart here on the left, this is representative of luminosity. So at the very top, 100% is 255 in terms of it's actually showing it as an 8-bit signal. This is a 10-bit file, but Premiere just shows it like this. So this is 100% luminosity. This is all lights on. This is full white pixels. All the way down the bottom, we have 0% luminosity. This is your true black point. So the deepest, darkest shadows. Who's deepest dark? That's Paddington Bear, isn't it?
Yeah. Deepest, darkest Peru.
Yeah. So Paddington Bear lives down here. And then, we make the journey to London. It's probably just in the mid-grays over here. So the midpoint is kind of where all this data is. And if we look at this thing here, this like histogram of information, it's not really a histogram. It's a waveform. It's very tricky to understand what you're looking at. To some people, it's like you're looking at the Matrix and you're like, what is this? But I can tell you that this particular part here, this is our brightest part of the image. And it actually happens just over halfway through the horizontal line of our footage. So think of this as a picture that's, shone like this. And then we've laid it down flat. And then we've got the peaks of where the shadows are and where the highlights are. So this is our brightest point. And these are some of our darkest points. And if we just go back over here, we can see, of course, this is a light. So this area, in fact, let me turn off my scope. So we can see this big chunk over here is representative of our light. And we can see it's just from the halfway point over to the right. And we can see these darker areas over here into this like steel work and other things. So this is representative of this particular image. So what we need to do when we come to grading is first of all, we need to just convert our color. We can see that that's immediately just stretched it out. So I'm converting my my color space based off the Fujifilm. You can just get these from Fujifilm directly. And that's just the immediate thing, just to see what we're working with. And we can just see that on and off. If we have a look in the lower left, we can see that vector scope, the waveform is just stretching. It's just adding more contrast. If I brighten things, you see that goes all the way up. If I darken things, it pushes everything down. So hopefully we'll get to this a little bit later on, but that's just an idea of a bit of a detailed explanation of why we're looking at a gray image. So let's now jump into assembling a bit of a timeline. So let me switch my workspace back to my standard 4K. And okay. So the way that I work is I have, as you can imagine, plenty of templates and things that I've created and set up. So I actually have just a sequence template that I use for the start of every single video that I put on my channel. And this just has my track names and layers and everything ready for audio, for video, any titles that I use repeatedly across each of my videos. And they're just there, ready and waiting for me to use.
Loving the really big text.
Yep, really big text.
These are great. And also, like, for those who are going into like prolific content creation, having these files must be so handy and save you so much time.
Mm-hmm. Even down to the Finder level. In my sort of file structure, I have a template folder, and with that has this template Premiere project and all my folders ready and waiting to go. Like all of these, they're just empty, but they're here and they're ready for me to drop in. This way, when I start a new project, all I need to do is just duplicate that template and go 2023, what are we, 27, and then project name. Cool. Now I just open this Premiere project and drop in my footage, and
Amazing.
I've got the quickest setup to get going with the next video thing. It just removes any sort of friction and hurdle of like, oh, now I need to import my stuff, and oh, I need to create a Premiere. Like, all of these things stop you from doing your work, and they'll prevent you from procrastinating away. Likewise, the biggest benefit to this is it means that because I've had this set up from literally from day zero when I started doing my video stuff, it's changed only a little bit. So if I went into an old video structure from, say, 2016, I'd find pretty much the same thing. And so I immediately know where my footage is and how it's organized. My project file is always going to reference the source video that is a parent, it's not parent folder, it's within the same directory. So it's always able to search relative to its own location of this file. This never moves anywhere else. And so I can just grab that one folder and just know that everything's safe to move around. It's just so valuable setting these things up.
Sandrine has asked, would you use libraries to store your template and have them in hand? With a little comment underneath saying, provided that there are libraries in Premiere too.
As in Creative Cloud libraries?
Yeah.
I suppose I could. I've never tried putting a sequence in one, to be honest. I think maybe I just approach it from an old school perspective of thinking file management first. And so I like to be the control freak over my own files and not have them, stored all around the cloud in places. I do use CC libraries a lot for video things, like all my titles and assets and all my like production things that I'm working on, different versions I put through in libraries. But yeah, I've never put sequences or files, like a Premiere file, in.
Yeah, I guess it would be quite big files to sort of be keeping up there as well, wouldn't it? Like, especially if you're keeping all of your assets all linked.
Yeah,
it makes sense to keep them on your RAID.
The link is absolutely probably the most vital part, because I will move it from local to my server and other things. If that cloud-based document is trying to reference somewhere else, then yeah, it's going to cause issues at some point. I can just feel it. So so I have my template sequence here, which I just duplicate. So I just right click on here, duplicate, and let's call this one Adobe Live trains and underscore version name. Let's drop that into a new bin or folder, as you may want to call it. And let's just call this one Adobe Live. That's my sequences. And the reason I'm not numbering this is because I'm not going to be publishing this via my channel. You can see here, these are my existing sequences that I'm currently working on. So I've got, how many is that in the works? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sequences that I'm currently midway through editing each of them, plus about 8 that I've currently completed, and then I've got a few more sequences that I need to start assembling. So I've got a lot from this one trip. It's going to see me good for the next couple of months, which I'm very happy about.
You'll be editing for a while, eh?
Yes, I am locking myself away. No daylight for me. All right, so we open our sequence, and as much as I have my template, I'm actually just going to delete all of this, because I'm just going to make a blank sequence. I'm not doing my titles and things. But what this sequence is a DCI 17 by 9. If we go sequence settings, you can see a resolution. So 17 by 9, which is 4096 pixels width, 2160 vertical. My camera shoots 17 by 9 natively, so I can do that fine. It's a little bit wider than your regular widescreen TV, which would be 16 by 9. So this is DCI, which is the cinema format, and I'm running a 25 frames a second timeline because we're in Europe. Japan, interestingly, actually, is split between PAL and NTSC on electricity. So
really,
I think it's from the position of about Tokyo. The western side of Tokyo I believe, which way is it? I think it's the western side is 50 hertz and the eastern
Yeah.
side is 60 hertz. So
Wow.
the power comes in differently. And I want to say this is part of the reason why some of the train lines don't actually go the full length. Like you couldn't go from, say, Sendai to Osaka because the
Yeah.
trains run at different currents. I think that's one of the reasons anyway. But yeah,
Yeah,
so
I think thinking about it, I've always had to like you always have to kind of like stop at Tokyo, get off a train,
mhm.
and then yeah, never really
Mm,
realized that.
yeah. But it also means
Ah.
when it comes to filming, I just leave my camera at 50 hertz. It generally does a pretty good job. But in America, I notice this a lot. If I'm filming lights and other things, you'll get the flickering and you'll get the banding because your
Hmm.
shutter speed is going at a different rate to what the lighting is refreshing at, and
Yeah.
that's why you get those issues. You can adjust it with little changes to your shutter speed on your camera, which is what I do in Tokyo if I ever notice it. But for the most part, it's there's so many different light sources that you don't really notice it too much because they all run
Yeah.
different things anyway. Um, cool. Right. Oh my god, we are half an hour in, and I've not even put a single clip in yet. All right. So, source video. So I've got all of my footage in here, and these just match up from Finder. I just drag and drop them in. I do know that I've actually taken the first half of this offline because I filled up my SSD. So let's go from, it was a particular day where I went out filming to try and recreate one of my greatest train shots I ever got. And in fact, let me just show you that great shot. I think I have it in here. Okay, so this was a video I made. When did I make this? 2020, but it was filmed in
Hmm.
2019. I'm just going to play it full screen from the start. So, of course, starts with this train shot, which is just my greatest shot I ever got. It's a complete fluke how this happened. Filming out of the window. We'll just let it play. Okay, so that shot, as it was coming through, and this other train just peers in front just at the moment I'm filming this particular scene through this window, was just
It's a
the
brilliant
ultimate
shot.
fluke. So I was poised and resi for this particular view. I had no idea that another train could even come in front of the shot like this, let alone have the timing so perfect. And this particular view, this is looking out at Shinjuku in Tokyo, and I film it every single time, and I definitely film it every single time I run this train now because I'm looking for this shot again.
There's
So
so
this
much
was
appreciation for this, by the way, in the comments. Eric says, "What a lovely opening shot." Um, Apology if I say your name wrong, but Umacorn says so good. Caroline, wow, that's so atmospheric. Bob, that was a cool shot. Yeah, so much love for this clip for you.
yeah, it's it just I was so excited as it happened, and you can kind of see I'm in the reflection. In fact, I might have cut it for this particular one. But I'm in the reflection, and I'm pretty sure you can just see me beaming away. Like I'm just like, I I was stood like kind of awkwardly as well because I was just like I'm not moving from this shot. I'm dedicated to this and holding the shot. But anyway, so this was it was 2018. This was filmed. Yeah, February 2018. So I think that was on my like fourth or fifth trip to Japan or something. I've since done, I had since done like 8 trips afterwards. Never
Hmm.
caught it again. Tried it every single time. Never caught that shot again. But on this particular trip, I made a day of it. I was like, I am going to get this shot because.
How many times did you take that train?
So,
or how many hours did you spend
on this particular day? So trying to recreate it. So we've got these shots here, and I'm going to be editing this as a vlog. But we can see it starts off in daylight. Of when we're running this train. So it's between two stations on so it's between Shin Okubo and Shinjuku station. You have to ride the Yamanote line, and it's the Chuo line that comes through in front. Now, of course, everyone knows that trains in Japan are very efficient. They run on time. The Yamanote in particular runs on time. The Chuo line, though, is one of the only lines in Tokyo that is like infamously delayed. It's just, it's not an accurate train. And that made it ever more difficult trying to get this particular shot, because trying to time the train coming from the other station. So it's, we were at Shin Okubo, and it was coming from Okubo station, which is just over another block. And they sort of converge. It actually comes underneath and then around. Trying to get that train to leave at the same time is very difficult. So plenty of videos back and forth. And I did capture it. I can tell you now, I did capture the shot. So let me try and find this. And this is one I want to try and... Is it this? The other thing is trying to work out, where does it actually happen? You're like, I just keep filming. So this is the view that I was going for, which is that. I think it actually happened a little bit later because that's still kind of bright-ish. Definitely filming plenty of behind the scenes, discussing the plan of how it works. So one of the things that I wanted to improve upon on my existing shot that I have of it is to reduce that reflection. So I was actually using, you can kind of see it in this reflection, I was using a massive rubber lens hood pressed up against the window. And then as it comes to the shot, I like really press against the window. Missed it on that one. In total, I think we went back and forth maybe like 15 times or so.
Wow.
Over a few hours. Thankfully, the trains, they run every 3 or 4 minutes. So, yeah, it is doable.
Did you have to take a break over rush hour, or were you lucky enough that the train wasn't too packed?
Oh my God, it was probably the worst timing to do it. It was December 30th, okay? And New Year's is kind of the biggest celebration in Japan.
Huge, yeah.
Most people who live in Tokyo, they disperse and they go to where their families live, like in rural areas. December 31st, a lot of the trains and places just kind of shut down, and I think this particular December 30th was a Friday as well. So doing this in the evening on what is the equivalent of what would be, say, Christmas Eve in the UK, riding the trains, it was busy.
Yeah, to put it into perspective, you have to book, if you're going to be traveling between sort of like the 28th of December and about, I think it was like the 3rd or 4th of Jan, you have to book your seat well in advance to get a seat on a train. Like, that's how rammed the trains are. So yeah, to be able to actually manage to do this sort of at New Year's, it's pretty out there.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I found the clip where I was able to capture it, so we can just watch this in full.
Where is it? There it is.
You hear me like shouting for it.
Are you excited?
So this one I was able to capture it with a wider lens as well, so we got an even fuller effect of it.
Wow. Is that you squealing?
Yeah. I mean, how magic is that? Like, the whole thing. We are playing it twice.
Ultimate commitment.
the whole thing just coming together. So I am gonna start with this clip because this is what we were looking for. And as we were just saying, show the answer first, then the workings out. So in my source monitor, it's gonna set an endpoint. It almost looks like a model railway. Like it looks like a toy.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna get a little bit more than what I actually need. So I just set my in, my out, and then in my timeline, I can either just drag and drop, or I can just press comma, and that just drops it into my timeline, depending on where these placement things are set. So I'm going to go through and I'm just going to pull together a load of different train shots and some other things. And then I've got some music that I want to, try out. And I'll just show you how I assemble things. Hopefully we'll come to some sort of sequence that is kind of interesting. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. So let's just browse for some other clips that we've got. That's the same journey with a mist one. What do we got here?
So Tony has popped a little comment in the chat around the subject of model releases. Obviously, you're documenting out in the public. How does that work for you?
So in terms of like street photography and things like that, I personally never like to get too close to things, just on my own comfort level and other stuff. For the most part, I have like a personal perspective on like a wider scene view. If there's a direct individual that is, very recognizable and is clearly the subject, then that is someone that I would approach and, get permission from. Usually that's more of like a verbal thing. Wouldn't necessarily have like a written thing.
Paperwork. Yeah.
It's a bit of a gray area, to be honest. But that's where I kind of shy away from having those direct focuses, or foci. Is that the correct plural? On
we'll go with
things. Yeah. Cactus, cacti, focus, foci. There we go. Lexus, lexi.
You heard it here first. It is now the official term.
Yeah. So yeah, if they're not like a direct focus of the shot, then I don't worry too much about it. Yeah. I've never had an issue. I think going back to the position we were talking yesterday of having a kind face and kind intentions, I make myself presentable and very noticeable. Like I don't hide the camera. I don't try and get the sneaky shot. I'm there, full blown camera, big fluffy microphone. Like that I'm taking something, and I do that very intentionally, because it shows that this is what I'm capturing. If you enter the scene, you've entered into my shot, and it is very obvious. And it's quite funny actually, the amount of people who when I've got the camera pointed at myself and I'm vlogging, people walk behind the camera and they duck. They duck down. It's like the camera's not even pointed outwardly. It's pointed at me, but people behind the camera. So I do think maybe there is a little bit of a lack of understanding of how cameras actually work, but people know that things are being captured. That's the point I'm making there. And so yeah, people do avoid it and other things. But yeah, for the most part, I'm able to have like a very quick but communication with someone, and they're usually okay, or you can feel when someone doesn't want to, and I'm never going to exploit that. Okay, so we've just got some other clips here. Now I like this particular one. This is like a static version of a different oh, that could be a nice little boomerang.
It would be.
Static version of a similar scene. Unfortunately, the focus was just missed. But we may be able to work with that. So I'm just going to drag this in, but I'm not actually going to use it. I'm going to just position it on a different track, because I don't want these two to follow after each other. They're a little too similar, really. So I'm just going to go through. This might be the only shots that I have from this particular day that are worthwhile. This train's actually going in the other direction, so I'd probably reverse that if I was to use it. Again, this is one of the magics of when your trains are running at similar speeds, the background is different to the foreground to the train in between, and you just get this triple parallax happening, which I love. Ooh, double decker.
I didn't actually see any double deckers while I was out this time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a bit of a rare one for me.
I wish we had double decker trains in the UK, but unfortunately all our tunnels are way too small. There was actually a double decker Shinkansen that existed. The full length of it was top and bottom, that used to run between Osaka and Tokyo. I say it used to because it stopped, I believe, 2 or 3 years ago. And I saw it once and I was like, oh, wow. Like, that is a big, beefy train. The whole length of it, double decker, running at 300 kilometers an hour or something silly. Okay, so I'm just going to open up some other projects. Now, the thing that's funny about this is I can pretty much open almost any folder of days and there will be train footage because I'm just constantly filming. Okay, so that's kind of nice. So just going to drop that in. Just playhead. So I'm just going to find different clips of things and
those the things that you hold on the trays, they dangle so much lower in Japan as well. I'm pretty sure. I can't get around denying that. But the amount of times I knocked my head on them, I didn't learn.
Every day.
Yep.
Okay, do we have any train stuff on this particular day? Probably. Towards the end. Yep, of course. So I'm just going to pull in different clips. I'm going to show you a little editing workflow that I use quite a lot. So I'm pulling these clips in as like my source. And in fact, just to make it a little bit more pleasant to look at, I'm just going to enable the color correction, so that we can see. So these are all Fuji, which is great. So,
makes such a difference, doesn't it?
Yeah, this is something I do quite a lot actually, is whilst I'm editing together, I just do a basic color correction. It makes you excited to use the footage. And yeah, it just flows, I don't know, a little bit easier. I'm just going to leave it on this workspace just because it's a little larger for you to see. And
what's your go-to camera for filming? Like if you're on a trip like this, what's the one that you're picking up the most often?
So my new Fuji X-H2S has fast-tracked its way to becoming my favorite camera ever. I absolutely adore this camera. So it's just a workhorse. So traditionally I've been doing photography and video side by side. So quite often that meant that I needed 2 cameras, one for video, one for photo. Bit of a pain to go around, but it did mean that it was always, an effective workflow. Because I had this mentality of I'm holding this camera, which at the time would have been, say, my Panasonic. I would have felt I was in video mode. If I was holding my Fuji camera, I would have felt like I was in photo mode. And it really helps just like having these like muscle memories or triggers, just, you can quickly do that. But also I like to use maybe different lenses for video as I do for photo. Definitely need filters for video, maybe not so much on photo, and other things. So I just always had 2 cameras. But this whole time, I just wished I could do it with one, or at least one brand. Because what I found is that, some cameras, they, as I've previously liked Fujifilm for photography, but I didn't really like them for video. I didn't like how they handled some of the auto aspects. For photography, when I was using my Panasonic, as I mentioned yesterday, I only ever used my GH5 for video because I loved what it did for video. But for photography, I wasn't so drawn to it. So finally having a camera that I am happy with the video results as well as the photo results, it just makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And it's a very personal thing, but yeah. How cool is this train, by the way? I mean,
Oh,
look at
that's
that
awesome.
hooter. Look at the nose on that. Love it.
Where was this filmed?
I think this is Ormia Station.
Mm.
Yeah. So it filmed a follow-up to... Oh, I'm dropping that in the wrong place. Filmed a follow-up to the Japan Rail series that I made in 2019. So that was a 4-part series, 21 days across Japan, traveling by train. On this particular trip, we were running out of time towards the end of the trip, and I was like, I want to make at least a mini rail series. So I was able to buy a 5-day Tohoku pass, which is is actually slightly cheaper than it is to do a Shinkansen return up to Sendai. So a Shinkansen return is 22,000 yen from Tokyo to Sendai. For a 5-day pass, it's 20,000 yen for all of like northern Japan. 20,000 yen is about 120 pounds. So it's actually a bargain. And you can just go on any of the Japan rail trains, which is most of them.
And there's some really scenic routes up that way as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep, definitely. Okay, I quite like this clip. I'll film this one in slow-mo. Do I catch it? Do I catch it? Oh, I missed it. Okay, I'm just going to drop it in anyway. He's got some more scenes moving. Oh, again, filming out the window, and then another train passes you by. That shows how fast they're going as well, even at like a slow speed. Because I think these trains are about 200 meters long.
Yeah, I would say that's probably about right.
And that was actually 2 joined together. You saw the break in the color. So it's green, and then you see there's the white one. So that's 2 trains. Okay, so let's drop that in and delete that original one. So I'm just going to find essentially just some random clips and piece these into something.
Some great views.
Okay. So what I'm doing is I'm just looking for, I'm kind of scrubbing through, just finding parts of interest. So obviously here I've again got my static framing, and I quite like how the road just appears and then is immediately blocked off by another building. So that could just be all that we need. Just that. Boom. And of course, again, that was an 8-second clip. So definitely filming enough before and after of what you actually need. Now, I do know that I got a really great clip. I don't think I have it online with me. I think I've got it in a different hard drive.
Do you find that you remember most of the stuff you shot?
Yes and no.
You know the good bits that the bits that you want are in there.
Yeah, I think by doing the labeling of what happened during the day, I try and add some sort of descriptive factor, especially if I'm filming maybe 2 different videos. It could be like a very gear-based, like factual video alongside travel. I'll put both of those titles into the day description. That way I don't want to put all the effort into filming a specific video and then just completely forgetting to edit it and find it. So I do find that by giving like a bit of a day description does help sort of jog the memory a little bit. In terms of an individual clip, yeah, I probably do struggle to remember specifically, unless it's something that I'm definitely like excited by. But I think because I've been doing this for so long now, and I know my style, I can kind of look at things. And this particular shot, I clicked on it because I knew that it was framed kind of as I wanted it to. And because I'm quite disciplined in when I start and stop my clip, I knew that that first frame that's visible there is going to be how the majority of the clip looks. You know, it's not like I've started it on the platform ground and then picked it up, which is probably another reason why, you know, being intentional of when you start and stop your recording, is when you look at it in a thumbnail view like this, you know what those clips are because it starts with how you wanted it to. It would be a nightmare if all of these were just
floor shots,
terribly framed to start with. Yeah. So yeah, I have good trust and faith in past Joe to know that this clip is what future Joe is looking for. Okay, so we've just got some various scenes on things. Don't know if there's any. How are we doing on time? Oh wow, we are. All right. Coming up to the hour. Just scrubbing through. It's kind of interesting, the light. Okay.
Those windows are great.
I think I'm gonna adjust the goalpost a little bit on what my intentions are for the stream, and I'm gonna show you snippets of workflow and how I piece things together. Because in half an hour, I can tell you right now, I'm definitely not going to be able to get a sequence done.
Because you've got so much great content.
How I would go about it. Okay, so I'm just going to spend another few minutes or so just finding some great clips. Right, let's have an actual. Right, stop and pay attention, Joe. Let's have a look. What are we looking for? Yes.
If anyone does have questions for Joe, please do feel free to drop them in the comments over at Behance. There's lots of you in the chat, but yeah, if they've got any questions for Joe while he's looking through footage, please pop them in.
Okay. How about this view? Right. So this is a view of the Tadami train line, which runs about 4 times a day in daylight and 3 times a day in darkness.
Wow.
And it's this beautiful view of mountains, this bridge with, you know, if the water's still, you get the reflection. And then this single little train that just trots along and comes across.
Reminds me of Studio Ghibli.
Yeah, so we got up super early. Had to walk about 45 minutes to get to this viewpoint, and almost missed it, to be honest, because was kind of messing around trying to set up the camera to capture the behind the scenes of it. I almost missed actually getting the main aspect of it.
Yeah.
You can hear my camera going off taking photos as well.
One of my favorite parts of this today has been hearing the enjoyment you get when you know you've got the shot.
Yeah. Actually, I think that was Ellie had maybe missed. I think she was trying to get a film shot and didn't have enough time for it. Was doing digital. But we stayed for the 3rd train as well. So we've got the 1st, 2nd, and the 3rd train from this view.
So how long were you up there?
From about 7 a.m. until about 10, I think. Or 9:30.
Serious commitment to the shot then.
Yeah, freezing cold as well, as you can see. Different shots with telephoto lens and wide angle. Some shots in 6K in 3:2 aspect ratio because my camera can do open gate, and then others in 4K but at 50 frames a second if ever I wanted to slow it down a little bit. So definitely plenty of shots here, and I will, there we go, there's a closer one. I will spend some time going through and finding the right one. Here it comes again. Oh, select it right. Now what I had hoped is that I could use the two clips interspersed, where we've got the wide one and then we've got the close-up, and maybe just reverse a clip if the train was going a different direction. Hopefully you wouldn't see the snow falling up. But unfortunately, the first train had one carriage, the second train had two carriages.
Oh no.
And then the third one was, I think, a different color entirely. So I was like, oh, okay, we can't make it look like it's one train. But anyway, so we drop these in, and are there more train shots? Oh, this is kind of nice. So this is now riding the actual train. So we weren't able to capture the fourth one in daylight because we needed to get that train and actually leave the place. But it's known as, like, I think the most scenic train line in all of Japan. The first time we rode it was in pitch black and just had no idea of what we were seeing. This particular moment is actually crossing the bridge that we were just looking at, and I wish I'd realized it at the time of filming, because I would have looked out of the right window rather than the left window, but caught me by surprise. Okay, so let's just drop that in. Right. Let's find some other interesting things. I'm wondering, are people bored of seeing the train shots now, or are they getting on board with it? I definitely didn't intend for the pun then.
We got a little bit quiet in the comments at the moment. But yeah, let us know how you're doing, guys. Are you still there? You still with us?
Okay, this is a particular moment I'm always looking for. So a lot of the train drivers, they're very intentional in when they go through their routine of what they need to do, to the point that they actually point. It's like, yep, checked that, that's done. So just
to let you know, people are like, keep the trains going, keep going. We just stunned them all into silence for a while.
Okay. So I was trying to capture this driver doing some of the little checks. Also, I thought this was kind of interesting. I don't know if you do as well. They run their scheduling system just on an iPad. I think it's an iPad mini there.
Love
that. So there we go. Just holding the frame, just knowing, like, you're going to do it. You're going to do it. There it is. There's a little point. Here comes another one. So just trying to find these little clips. And definitely have... Okay, this is where I remember another clip. To GBK. And...
with a few more puns coming up in the comments. Eric says he's keeping on track.
Right, I remember I was watching another driver at the end of this particular day. And so this was, again, this was a moment where the driver knew that I was filming. And she actually moved her bag out of the way so that I could get a clearer shot out of the front window, which I thought was very kind. So I'm just trying to get little details. Tentative moments of departing on time. Nervous hands. And then, what's this? I think
it's amazing that you can see in the... one of the things I noticed was that you can see into the train driver's cabin, which... not like from experience on other train systems around the world, they've never really been that open before. So
Okay, putting on a glove. It's going to get the full clip of that. Cool. Drop that in. What's this? Doing a train announcement. Is there good audio for that, maybe? It's not the clearest. Okay, this is what I was looking for. Right, so we load up the espresso here and start to brew our coffee. So let's go. Point to your intention. Ding ding, coffee in. Get it brewing. Train moving. That sound of the train just like.
Oh, is that what that was?
Always sounds like it's just kind of waking up. It's like, oh, okay, let's get going. Come on then. Cool. Those are our little movements. Right. Let's not potter about too much. So I've got some clips here and kind of piece them together onto a collection of like a timeline or so. What I would do is I would probably spend days, like actually days, going through and just like piecing these things, these types of videos that I'm, wanting to make, where it's like a bit of a show reel, a bit of a, particular best of montage. I don't necessarily work on them in isolation. I do them as I'm piecing together my other videos. And so where I find like a great clip and I'm like, that would be great for this one. Let me just set that aside. And so I'll go through this process and I'll create a timeline like this, where it's just clips.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to show you a workflow scenario that I do on these particular projects that is so useful. It may not appear as useful in this instance. And the way that we do that is I will create a new sequence. So I have my template again. I'm just going to duplicate this. What did I call this one? Like Adobe Live Trains V2. And where did I put it? Adobe Live.
And this is where it's really important to have everything named.
Yes. So I'm going to call this one Master. And in fact, this will become my V1. And my master doesn't need a version control. So let's just change my workflow workspace back to my 4K one, so that I have my side-by-side, my source, my program, which is program is effectively what you're creating. This is the end output. And then we have our sequences down here. So I go into my sequences and I have my master and I right click and I do open in source monitor. So now this timeline is my source. So these are all of these clips combined together. Okay. And then from here, I click onto the wrench and I do, where is it? Open sequence in timeline. Now that might seem a bit silly because we did have it open. In fact, we have it open again, but you'll see now in the parentheses, we have source monitor. So that means, and our playhead is also turned to red. What we change up here is adjusting the source. Now, if I double click on my template that I just created, so this is now the blank one, this is going to be our build. This is what we're actually creating. And if I just drag that down into here, now I've got a stacked timeline view. And this is so helpful. In a scene like, or in a project like this, it may not appear that helpful because I've only got, 12 clips here or so. But in projects, as one that I'm currently working on, which is a big sort of interview piece, mini documentary style, I've got about 6 hours worth of footage to make a 3-minute video. Having all of your best clips and everything laid out in a massive timeline as your source makes it so great to then be able to build two things at the same time. So hopefully you're with me on that. Because what I would do is I'll browse through my source. I can browse that in this window. And I can either just copy this, and then in my main timeline I can build it, or within my source, again, I can just use my in and my out. So I can set an in point, set an out point, and I can build that again. And because this is our source timeline, our source monitor, I can then build it into my main program. And now this particular clip has jumped in onto my timeline. And if I double click onto that, it's actually a nested version of that other one. So it's kind of like a, clip within a clip. I don't necessarily like doing it that way, but that's kind of what's happening. Let me just reopen. Shouldn't have double clicked that. That's just messed it up a little bit. Reopen timeline.
Sandrine pointed out that the noise that the train makes sounds like the cat bus from Totoro. And I think that's probably one of the most accurate comments I've seen.
Yep. Okay, so if you followed what I was doing just then, it was creating a nested clip of all of this timeline. The reason I don't like doing that is because if ever I adjust this master timeline and I add another clip in the middle of it, that could throw out of sync all of these clips that you're building, because that is going to be referencing that original timeline. And so if anything changes within that original timeline, it's going to update throughout your master, your main program timeline. So what I like to do is just browse through this, and then if you hit F on any clip that you select on here, what it does is it matches that frame to the original source file. So we've got our master timeline, we hit F, now we hit the master file, and we're no longer relative to this timeline. And so from within here, I've now just done a quick workaround that saves me from going into my project, finding that particular clip, and then double clicking that and opening that in my source folder in a single key, F on the keyboard. We can just find that. And then from within here, I can browse back through any previous bits that I want. I've already got my ins and outs. And then I can just do my keyboard shortcut again, command, comma, to build it into my existing timeline. And so this is how I can quickly build things up and piece together what I want to do. And so I go from maybe this clip to start with, and then I may want to go into this one. So I hit F again. I'm like, yeah, cool. As long as my playhead's at the end. So comma adds things afterwards. Oops. Let's go F again. So comma adds things afterwards. If I zoom out on here, you'll see that that's continually adding all these clips. So I can just keep doing comma and just keep adding the same clip. If you do the full stop, and I do that in between two clips, it will overwrite it. And a comma will push things along. So yeah, maybe I explain that.
That's a really handy shortcut. Yeah.
So yeah, a comma pushes anything that's ahead of it. So if my playhead is in between, you'll see it will actually split these clips. We've got the start and the end, and then it's just put that one in between. In fact, let me demonstrate that with a different clip entirely. So let's say this one. And yeah, so a comma is just going to split those two together. A full stop is going to overwrite it. And so that's now gone over the top. If we put our playhead at the end, it's always going to move that playhead to the end of the clip. So you can just very quickly just go through, and with your keyboard, you can essentially do a lot of it just with the keyboard. You can, play your clip, I for in point, O for out point, comma to place. And then you can go on to the next clip, I for in point, O for out point, comma to place. And that works brilliantly. So I love doing that. Okay, I mentioned I'm not going to be completing a sequence here, but rather showing various workflows and stuff. But one of the biggest aspects is finding music.
Yes.
So if I go, I think I have my music set on this workspace. You notice I changed my workspace a lot. So I've got different ones set up. So this is what I use in my color grading, which is having a very big program view, my Lumetri color, any essential graphics, I'm putting titles in. I browse those. Just different viewpoints to use different tools. very handy chopping and changing these. So for
Absolutely.
music, normally I get my music elsewhere, but because we are on Adobe Live, I can browse through Adobe Stock. And I had a little look yesterday, and I found some parameters that I maybe want to use. So for different moods, we've got dreamy, we've got powerful, space age, and then in an electronic genre mixed with hip hop. Okay.
Love that.
This creates a little search parameter, and I can just browse through these. And if I go, let me open up my master as an actual program timeline. And do we want to? Yeah, we can have the. Let's just drop all of those audio down a little bit. If I do timeline sync, now I can just preview any of these tracks, and it will play that music alongside my video, and I can just browse and find what I want to work with. There it is. I can skip ahead. Yeah, good work, good work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually going to drop the audio. In fact, I'll just mute it so that we can just hear the music. And I can usually tell within a second if a track's going to work for me or not.
Do you find yourself drawn to certain genres of music?
Yeah, I do. It's actually quite annoying that I find myself drawn to certain genres because I always want to branch out and go down different things. But in the social media space, timing and publishing things fast is a real benefit.
Yeah.
And so I find myself drawn to things that I'm comfortable with, and I'm comfortable with things that I'm experienced with, which means that I do find myself going over similar sort of genres, which also means on the particular services that I use to find music, I do come across the same tracks or the same artists. And I can be quite stubborn in not wanting to repeat music that I've used in other videos.
Yeah.
For a couple of reasons. One is because the videos that I make, I like to make for myself primarily, and I make them as memories of my travels and trips. And so I actually build an emotional connection to the music and the videos that I make a lot of the time. So when I hear a track, it takes me back. I'm like, that was the Shinjuku train shot. I can't use that clip again. I can't use that track again because I hear that and I think this. And so because I'm so emotionally connected to that, I don't really want to repeat music again. If I'm making a video that's maybe a bit more like gear specific, and it might be like a review video or something like that, then yeah, I probably do repeat music more. But on these travel ones, and especially something that I'm classing myself as more of like a premium video, yeah, I spend hours, if not days, in fact, yeah, multiple days, trying to find something to work with. But this is great, being able to do a timeline sync. I can hear different tracks. And in fact, that one works really well. I'm going to save that one. And this is how it's so helpful to piece together like almost like a mood board of what your clips are. Because I know the feeling of the video that I'm looking to make is about all of these sort of moments and tracks combined. And so I can just place that music and play it to the feeling. And I know that, yeah, that could work. That could fit the genre. I'm not sure how that would fit with the snowy scenes. Maybe a little corporate sounding. But anyway, I did save a few tracks. Let's just clean up this gap here. Whoops. So I did already save a few tracks into a library.
Here's the stuff I found earlier.
And I couldn't actually decide which one I wanted to use. So, oops. Select all those again. Move selected items to... Wait, can I not just add them all into my project? Surely I can just do that. Can I drag? I can drag. Oh, put it into a bin. That was silly.
No.
Right. Let's go Adobe Live Music. Or whatever that spelling is. Right, let's drop all of those into there. Okay, so these haven't been licensed as yet, so I only play little sections of those. Just change my workspace back to here so I can have project and sidebar. I don't know why this is doing this lately. Every time I change it, it closes this all up and puts it into icon view. A little bit weird, but there we go.
At least they know it's live.
Yeah. So I got these clips here, tracks that I think could work. So I'll tell you what I'm looking for when it comes to finding music, because I want something that's got a bit of a rhythmic beat, because trains themselves are very rhythmic. You hear the all the time. But I don't want something that's too slow, because I want to have some sort of energy and activity into it. But I don't want anything that's like too aggressive and angry. I like having a little bit of like a technology, spacey feel. This is a very chill vibe.
Liz says, oh my goodness, I used that music on something the other day.
Oh, really?
But I guess that's how important music is. I often find, especially like certain TV shows, if they have stock music in them and then you hear it on an advert or somewhere else, it just completely takes you back to wherever you first heard it, doesn't it? So.
Yeah. In fact, I've just seen in the chat as well, Liz has also used.
Oh no, that's yeah.
Yeah, see, that's too dark. I'm not happy with that. Some of these as well, they feel quite seasonal in the sense that, you know, some of them I can imagine having like a real summer sort of vibe to it. Definitely not like winter scenes and other things. And this is one of the trickiest things I find, is so often when I'm finding music, I find the perfect track for my next project. It's never the perfect track. Yeah, it's never the perfect track for what I'm currently working on. It's always for the next video. And so I just save all these playlists, and then try and remember to reference them. If it's a particular video that I know I'm going to make, then what I quite often do is I create my folder structure in advance, license that track, or at least get the sample version of it, and just put it in that folder so that it is ready and waiting. So when I eventually do film that video and I come to find some music, maybe I've forgotten that I've got the track, and then I come to find the music and I go to put it into my source audio music, and I'm like, oh wait, I've already got these tracks. Oh, thank you, Past Joe. That was a great help. And then I'll go through and then I'll have this idea, if I happen to have forgotten. But most of the time, if I found something in advance, it's a great motivator for filming the video. So, trying to find. It's a little corporate sounding. Okay, come on, I swear I had one. Is it this one? Sexy, feel-good, hip-hop groove. This might be what I was looking for. Trying to find it. So it's got that repetitive, techie sort of sound, but it sounds like a train. Like it's an audio interpretation of a train, in my ears anyway. So I'm gonna take this, and let's not put it in the master. Let's put it in this one. Drag it down, and oh god, we are running out of time. So this is, as I said, going through the workflow process. So what I do is I take my track, I play it, and I try to find the moments of interest. Okay, let's just make this waveform a little larger. Okay, so we find our points of where things change, and I just create a marker. So it's just M on the keyboard. So boom, there, M. And then you just kind of like play the DJ in your head, and you're counting in your rhythms. And previously, what I used to do when I first started is I would essentially create a marker for almost every bar, and I'd go through and I'd be like, so I just create my markers. I don't do that anymore because I find that I don't necessarily want to edit to the beat every single time. So what I do is I just find the significant points of interest. And you can either do that in your sequence here, or you can do it in your source, because you see they match up our markers. I've also set my default marker to white, by the way, which I just find it stands out so much better on this interface. I can even see where the things are changing. And so what I would do is I would find my significant points, and I already know that 2 minutes 47 is probably longer than what I want this clip to be. So I'm just going to be looking for an end point. I can just trim this down and match. So I can just find my marks like this. And this is going to be very, very rough and ready, but create my cut. And what I would probably do is just find the points. And essentially just take out bits of the middle. Now, there is that feature in Essential Sound that you can shorten tracks. It does a pretty good job a lot of the time, but I quite like to do things manually, and I have no idea if this is going to work. Okay, not quite, not quite. We've got a little bit of a double beat happening here, so I'm just going to trim. And then I would crossfade between. Something along those lines. And now I can have a little bit of an audio track that I can work with, and I can piece together how my sequence would come out. And from this point on, once we've done all of this setup and build process, it is a case of then just adding in our clips and working things together. So for argument's sake, this story is not going to make any sense, but let me just drop them in, lock my audio, and go through. And then I'm just going to use Q and W on the keyboard to trim tops and bottoms of the clips. And then my final little tip, which is a huge efficiency piece for editing. Okay, so we can start with this. Comes in, and I want the point to happen as the music drops. So the music drops here, which means we need to speed this along a little bit. If I use Y, I can just slip that clip. And I'm actually going to create a marker on that clip to know where my point of interest is on the clip. I can go back to my audio. We've already got the marker for the music drop, which means I just need to synchronize those two markers together. And now they should time. Cool.
Nice.
And so we're going to start with a long intro. And then I'm just going to cut away from it. Times like that, I always think of, this sounds weird, but I think of the iPod mini. Okay, hear me out.
Okay.
So when the iPod mini was around, it was Apple's best-selling product. Like, it was the world's most popular music player. At the peak of its selling, they killed it. They cut the product line, and then they created the iPod Nano. And I always think of that as an analogy of, you know, you've got this clip that's building to something, it's building, reaches the viewpoint, and then boom, iPod mini, you killed it. And you move on to the next thing. And maybe it makes sense, maybe it doesn't. But okay.
And would you go back to that? Would you go back to any of that scene later, maybe? Possibly,
but probably not. If I've got plenty of clips I want to work with, I would do something else. So I'm just going to shuffle these around. And again, this story is not going to make any sense, but I'm just finding my points and I'm just using W to trim to the side of that. And in fact, this particular clip, I'm going to cut from the zoom. And I'm going to find a point of where one of these pillars just covers the frame. So there, W. And I'm actually going to reverse this one because the train is going the other direction. In fact, that was actually quite nice. Those pillars coming across in time with the beat. So I just do my little sequences like this, and I would build it together. Now, I did mention I had one killer tip. And let's say you've got a huge sequence of stuff, and rather than just doing W and Q and, you know, trimming before and after, you can use the I and O keys as you go through a sequence. So I can play this. Like, cool, I know from here I'm good, so I want to mark that in. And then I want to start the next clip from here, so I do my O. So in, out, and then use the apostrophe, and that will lift it. And now I've done two things in one. I've trimmed off the end of this one, and I've trimmed off the beginning of the next one. Incredibly useful when doing vlogs, for example, where you want to trim bits in between sentences. You can just go in, out, lift, in, out, lift. The whole clip could be 30 minutes long, and you can quickly whittle that down to like a 2-minute, 3-minute video, just by doing.
And what
in,
were the
out,
shortcuts for that one? I, O, and
so I, O, and then apostrophe. Now the benefit to this as well is not only is it lifting things, so I and then O. Got a bit of lag there. And you can do it on a single clip. You can do it over multiple clips. When you lift it, it also copies it to the clipboard. So if, say, you were building a timeline of like outtakes and bloopers, you could take those out. You could paste it somewhere else in a timeline, maybe up here. And the other one is I-O and then semicolon. And you see the difference between those. So if I do I-O and then semicolon, it lifts it, but it doesn't close the gap. And so, again, also copies it to the clipboard. So you've got those two options there. And that is probably my biggest sort of speedy workflow thing of when I'm editing my timelines and piecing things together. So yeah, that's a run through of multiple workflow tips and all sorts of piecing together my structures. And now that I'm seeing my footage and this particular track, I'm wanting to spend the next week or so actually filling out this whole sequence and making it.
So we might actually see this one appear on your channels at some point in the near future then.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, I do need to make like a channel trailer for my YouTube channel. And it's probably heavily going to feature trains and cameras and a lot of Japan. That's going to make a lot of sense, I think. So yeah, that will end up on my channel at some point, I'm sure.
Well, speaking of channels, tomorrow we're going to be covering a lot of content for you all on how to batch content and make it as accessible as possible for multiple platforms and channels as well, which segues perfectly, actually, doesn't it? We're going to be looking at how you can go through and resize all of your images as quickly as possible and building that into your exports. And then, Joe, you're going to be looking at layer comps as well, aren't you? And how to quickly get things out in multiple formats so that you've got everything you need to get your content online.
Yes. So all the efficiency steps, and I think we connected a few days ago on our nerdy levels of file naming and management, and yeah, so it should be a good collaboration tomorrow of how we go through our workflow tips on piecing stuff together. Because yeah, both of us working in, you know, independent realms of attracting clients and other stuff, we have to piece together almost like a media pack of things, and the more efficient you can do that, the more likely you are to actually pitch yourself to clients. So hopefully we can show some tips that allow something to be built that is like a good representation of what your social media presence is online.
Absolutely. Well, that's it from us today. We'll be back tomorrow, and Joe will be hosting tomorrow. So we start at 12 again. So we would love to see you there. Thank you for joining us, and don't forget you can watch yesterday's and today's if you've missed part of it. You can watch it back on replay, and we'll see you tomorrow.
See you soon. Bye bye.
Bye.